distance in space.
I've been using Dihexa for the last 2 weeks or so in an attempt to recruit and fortify a greater number of muscle satellite stem cells for future growth. This process, whether achieved through training, ketogenic diet, or supplementation, seems key to myogenic muscle growth. Whenever I attempt a growth blast with slow-release oxytocin or with injectable ecdysterone, epicatogen, etc., the quality of my stem cell recruitment period seems to be the key factor in whether new growth is possible. This process is, in a nutshell, a matter of getting dormant muscle stem cells into a state known as deep quiescence. The normal dormant state of muscle stem cells is simply known as quiescence. Deep quiescence is a whole nother level. I recently explained this to Hannah while taking a leisurely drive.
What's the difference between quiescence and deep quiescence?
Okay, so quiescent muscle stem cells are essentially the bench players, say in a baseball game. They're sitting on the bench, but that's all they've ever done. If you had baseball players that had never done anything except for sit on a bench and read about baseball, by the time you called them into play, not many of them are going to survive and stay on the team to the next game. But by putting them into deep quiescence, it's the training stage. So it's the equivalent of a bench baseball player taking him back to training, and we're teaching you how to get strong, how to play baseball, and making you more resilient so that when you are called into the game, you make the team.
Under normal genetic circumstances, we have no lack of muscle stem cells available. The trouble is, they're fragile. Without the fortification of deep quiescence, the vast majority of these cells do not survive the growth process that is myogenesis. This is why training while using PEDs is so much more effective than not training and taking PEDs. You'd likely get some results from sitting around on your couch munching D-ball, but most of it would be water retention, perhaps the slightest amount of new muscle if you're lucky. But add in hard training, and it sends quiescent muscle stem cells into deep quiescence. In response to acute stress, muscle tears, etc., the body produces mechanogrowth factor, which, I believe, fortifies the stem cells by signaling the entry into deep quiescence. It's only later, as you rest, recover, and feed, that those muscle stem cells grow into new muscle. This phenomenon may also be one of several key reasons gains plateau, even on a heavy cycle. It takes time to build up a cache of deep quiescent cells. If you are attempting to put yourself into a constant anabolic growth state with excessive calories and heavy supplementation, it's only a matter of time before you run out of raw building material and are left to mine the wimpy unfortified stem cells. Most of these don't make it, so the gains stop. And now the question is, are we just wasting valuable stem cells at this point? I mean, we're still calling them into play via androgen receptor stimulation, but we're out of the real hardy fellows and left with the untrained newbie cells that aren't making the cut. The goal of my 3-month rotation is to do a short growth blast for a few weeks, followed by a more lengthy recruitment period. To dip into a baseball analogy again, which would you rather have on your professional team? A standard number of very, very skilled players? Or an endless supply of useless, weak, clueless scrubs constantly getting struck out? We can only play so many players at a time, we might as well hire the best. But the question is, do we have a limited amount of players available in general? And how do we get the most out of them? Well, I can answer the second question really quick. We get the most out of our stem cell players by training them, putting them into deep quiescence. And, as far as we know, the option of going into deep quiescence is available to any muscle satellite stem cell. We just have to coax it there. So that just leaves the question of, do we eventually run out? Theoretically, it is possible, but in the real world, as we get older, the issue isn't a lack of stem cells, but a lack of healthy stem cells. I would be surprised if scientists began testing 90-year-olds and found that they were fresh out of muscle stem cells entirely. That doesn't happen. What actually happens, according to this study here, in aged muscle, satellite cells that experience prolonged quiescence, key here, not deep quiescence, prolonged quiescence, will undergo programmed cellular senescence, an irreversible, non-dividing state that handicaps the regenerative capabilities of muscle. The same article states, This review examines how periodic activation and cycling of satellite cells through exercise can mitigate senescence, acquisition, and myogenic decline. In other words, train to maintain your supply. Training sends stem cells into deep quiescence for future use. Not training leaves them dormant and unused. After a while, they sit dormant so long that they functionally fall apart. So, it's not that we run out of stem cells as we age, it's that we can't use the ones we have as they no longer work. As the study states, periodic activation through training, and other methods potentially, my words, can send more of these cells into training camp, keeping a fresh supply as we go. Think about it. You're always going to be relying on your stem cells even if you don't train. Cell turnover is a given part of life, but having healthy cells to rely on is not a given. That brings us to Dihexa. Well, possibly. It is still a very loose theory on my part that Dihexa assists in putting muscle stem cells into deep quiescence. All I have to back it up is a few observations and anecdotal reports, and it's the same with MGF, mechanogrowth factor. But as mechanogrowth factor is a very slight variant of IGF-1 and clearly does not appear to act the same way as IGF-1 when injected, I feel and think that it's not too big a leap of logic to assume that some forms of growth factors prep stem cells by sending them into deep quiescence, and still others stimulate them to grow and divide as new muscle tissue. My goal during this current stem cell prep phase is to do my normal ketogenic/fasting phase, but with the addition of Dihexa. While not very scientific since it's just one guy trying it, I want to see if I experience greater results than normal during my upcoming growth blast. I've done many of these types of phases and have a pretty clear idea of what to expect under what circumstances. Again, it's anecdotal, but for me, seeing is believing. I got great results from my quote-unquote all-natural myogenic growth blast last go-around. I used no peptides and relied on my injectable ecti mix with genistein and DHEA and the addition of epicatechin. I feel the combo of strong injectable ecti and epicatechin were the key players to that success, and I plan to continue to incorporate both into the upcoming growth blast along with slow-release oxytocin, likely used on alternate days. All of that said, there's only so much anabolic stimulus will do. I believe the key factor at play in all of this, as long as you're getting enough anabolic IGF-1 type stimulus, will be the number of deep quiescent stem cells available to call into play for new growth. As usual, I hope you found something of interest in this vid. If you have insights or questions, please feel free to hit me up in the comments. If you feel you already know everything there is to know, I recommend holding that sentiment back. As Mark Twain once said, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. I'll leave you with one more question from Hannah, and I'll see you back here next week.
Our bodies naturally produce oxytocin. Do our bodies also naturally produce Dihexa?
No. And I'm going to get a little bit of this wrong, so I'll correct it in the comments or in the description. Dihexa is a truncated or partial version of hepatocyte growth factor, or something like that, where it's just a few of the molecules instead of the whole thing. In my mind, again, saying that that's essentially the case, it would have more flexibility in what it could stimulate as far as growth factors go. In other words, hepatocyte growth factor receptors are really made just for hepatocyte growth factor. But since it's a truncated version, in my imagination at least, it would have an affinity and be able to fit into other places. And I can put up a study, note to self as editor, that Dihexa is in fact a growth factor mimetic, which means that it mimics growth factors. And with that in mind, it does mimic hepatocyte growth factor, but a lot of what people are experiencing is what I've also heard experience on a practical level with mechanogrowth factor. So I believe that it's making its way to those receptor sites as well, and maybe many others, maybe even nootropic growth factors, I think there's actually some mention of that. So that's what makes it kind of a master peptide, at least as far as having a wide range of effects in the body.